Mocked and rejected, the Omega never knew she was the Alpha King's fated mate. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to Lyra Snowveil. Moonlight drifted across the Silvercrest courtyard, catching on the rows of polished armor and silk gowns as the pack gathered for the annual moon oath ceremony. Laughter burst like sharp cracks through the cold air, carrying that familiar edge of cruelty that always seemed to find Lyra, no matter how small she tried to make herself. She kept her head down, clutching the serving tray pressed against her chest, praying she could blend into the shadows long enough to survive the night. But the scent of expensive perfume and mocking whispers closed in before she even took her next step. Look who crawled out of the kennels, Beta Raven drawled, loud enough for half the courtyard to hear. She flicked her wrist, sending a splash of red wine arcing through the air. It hit Lyra's simple gray dress with a warm sting, spreading across the fabric like a blooming wound. The crowd erupted. Someone snorted. Someone else called her mute little nobody. Lyra's breath hitched, heat rising behind her eyes, but she kept her gaze locked on the stone beneath her feet. She knew better than to react. In this pack, pain was a sport, and she was the favorite target. Raven leaned closer, her voice a venomous purr. Don't worry, sweetheart. No one expected you to look presentable, or smell presentable, or matter. Another wave of laughter. Lyra's fingers trembled around the battered tray. Her wolf, faint and quiet inside her, shivered with humiliation. She had known her entire life. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to breathe. She wanted, just once, to know what it felt like not to be the pack's joke. Her instincts screamed at her to run, and before they could humiliate her further, she slipped through the crowd and out toward the tree line. Cold wind brushed her cheeks as she reached the edge of the forest. She knelt beside the stream, scooping handfuls of icy water to scrub the wine from her dress, her teeth chattering as the night deepened around her. The ceremony's music thumped in the distance, laughter echoing like ghosts behind the trees. She hated that she cared. She hated that a single ruined dress could make her chest tighten like she couldn't breathe. She told herself she wasn't crying. It was just the wind, just the cold. She didn't know eyes were watching her from the balcony overlooking the courtyard, silver eyes that hadn't moved from her since the moment Raven spilled the wine. She didn't know the Alpha King himself had paused mid-step, expression unreadable as he tracked every tremble in her shoulders, every quiet breath she took. All she knew was the silence of the forest, the sting on her skin, and the growing certainty that tonight would be just another night she survived instead of lived. But far beyond her understanding, the threads of fate were already tightening around her, pulling her toward a destiny she had never dared imagine, and toward a king who had already recognized the scent she thought she didn't have. Lyra stayed by the stream longer than she meant to, her fingers red from the icy water, her breath turning white in the cold night air. She kept scrubbing the stained fabric even after the wine was gone, as if she could wash away the humiliation itself. But the sound of laughter drifting from the courtyard reminded her that no matter how clean the dress became, she would never be seen as anything more than the Omega who should have stayed invisible. She straightened, hugging her arms around her body, preparing herself to return before someone noticed she had slipped away. But as she stepped back toward the tree line, a sudden rustle from deeper in the forest made her freeze. It was not the wind. It was a sound too soft, too fragile. A whimper. Lyra turned toward the noise. Her instincts pulled her forward just as a faint cry echoed through the dark pines. She moved slowly, brushing past branches, her heartbeat quickening with every step. When she reached a patch of tall grass near a fallen log, she saw it. A small wolf pup, no bigger than a house cat, curled into itself and trembling violently. Its fur was silver-streaked with hints of darker shadow, glowing faintly under the moonlight. One of its front legs was twisted at a painful angle. The creature whimpered again, trying to push itself upright only to collapse. Lyra knelt immediately. "Hey," she whispered, her voice soft and steady even though her hands trembled. "It is all right. I am not going to hurt you. The pup sniffed weakly, its sides rising and falling too fast. She knew she should go get help, but she also knew what the hunters would do to a lone pup found near their borders. They would call it a threat. They would put it down without hesitation. Lyra carefully slid her arms under the small body. The pup cried out, a tiny sound of pain that made her chest tighten. I know, she whispered. I am sorry. I am just trying to help you. The creature pressed its face into her chest as she stood, as if trusting her without question. She cradled it close, keeping its injured leg steady. She had barely taken 2 steps back toward the clearing when a voice cut through the trees from behind her. Lyra Snowveil. She froze. Her breath caught. That voice was low, unyielding, and filled with a strength that vibrated through the air like distant thunder. She turned slowly. A tall figure stepped between the trees, black cloak brushing the ground, silver eyes shining in the dim light like polished steel. The Alpha King, Aldric Thornveil himself. He looked nothing like the stories whispered in fear around pack fires. He was not monstrous. He was controlled, powerful in the way a storm is powerful before it breaks. His gaze flicked from her face to the pup in her arms, lingering there with an intensity that made Lyra's pulse stumble. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Aldric stepped closer, boots silent against the forest floor. Where did you find him? His tone held no accusation, only something sharper. Something that felt like fear buried beneath command. He was alone, Lyra managed. In the grass. He was hurt. I could not leave him. Aldric's eyes darkened, the muscle in his jaw tightening. He reached out with one hand, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the heat of his presence. Give him to me. Lyra hesitated. Not because she defied him, but because the pup whimpered louder and burrowed deeper against her. Aldric noticed. His expression shifted, something unreadable passing through it. He trusts you. Aldric said quietly, more to himself than to her. That is unexpected. Lyra did not understand, but she gently offered the pup toward him. The moment Aldric's hands closed around the tiny wolf, the air shifted. A pulse of energy, faint but real, rippled outward like the quiet beat of a distant drum. Lyra's breath caught as Aldric looked up at her. Silver eyes locked onto hers, steady and unblinking. Something old, something instinctive, something she had no name for passed between them. And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt seen. Not mocked, not ignored. Seen. She stepped back, suddenly overwhelmed. Aldric studied her for another long moment, as if he were trying to place a memory he had never actually lived. Then he said, his voice low, You should not be in these woods alone. Lyra swallowed hard. No one notices when I am gone. A faint sound left him. Not a laugh. Something darker. They should. His tone held iron. And they will. She did not know what he meant. She only knew her heart was racing too fast, and she did not know how to hold her breath steady under the weight of his attention. Aldric shifted the pup gently in his arms. Go back to the courtyard, Lyra Snowveil. Her name in his mouth felt different. Like it mattered. She turned to go, unaware that his gaze followed her until she disappeared behind the trees. Unaware that the Alpha King's pulse had changed the moment her scent reached him. Unaware that destiny had already begun to close its hand around them both. Lyra walked back toward the courtyard with her heart still pounding too fast, every step feeling strangely unsteady, as if the forest floor had shifted under her feet. She kept replaying the moment when the Alpha King's eyes had locked onto hers, the way something silent and powerful had moved through the air between them, something she could not name, but could still feel tingling at the back of her neck. She whispered to herself that she must have imagined it, that he had only been concerned about the injured pup, but the sound of his voice saying her name would not leave her mind. By the time she reached the edge of the clearing, the ceremony was in full swing again. Torches crackled along the stone walls, casting flickering gold light across the courtyard, and dancers spun in circles beneath the rising moon. No one noticed she was returning, just as she had said. She slipped into the same shadowed corner she had always occupied, hugging the wall and pretending she could make herself invisible. But the moment she stepped inside, Beta Raven spotted her. Raven's voice cut sharply through the air. Well, look who crawled back. Did you wash off your humiliation, Lyra, or did it stain your skin permanently? Several wolves nearby laughed, eager to join Raven's cruelty. Lyra kept her head down, but her hands clenched around the empty serving tray. Her pulse hammered. She remembered Aldric's words in the forest. They should notice. And they will. She dared one small glance across the courtyard. Aldric had returned. He stood near the front of the gathering, the tiny pup wrapped securely in his cloak. His expression was carved from stone as he listened to one of the elders, but every few seconds his eyes drifted across the crowd, searching for her. Lyra startled when she realized the moment his gaze landed on her. His posture shifted. The stern line of his mouth tightened. She felt the weight of it even from across the courtyard. Raven noticed too. Her smirk faltered. She turned, watching Aldric with a sudden nervous stiffness. "Why is he looking this way?" she whispered to her circle, her confidence cracking. What did that mute little Omega do? The group around her murmured, uncertain. Lyra tried to slip behind a column, but Aldric was already moving. He crossed the courtyard with a stride that cut through the noise and laughter like a blade through rope. The crowd parted for him instinctively, heads bowing as he passed. Lyra's breath tangled in her throat. He stopped only a few feet away. The air shifted again. The torches seemed to dim. Even Raven fell silent. Aldric's voice was low and steady. "Lyra Snowveil." She forced herself to meet his eyes. A soft tremor ran through her chest at the way he said her name again, as if he knew it better than she did. He extended his hand slightly, not touching her, but inviting her forward in front of everyone. The courtyard fell completely silent. Wolves who had never looked at her before were now staring as if seeing her for the first time. Raven hissed under her breath. "What is happening?" Aldric's gaze did not flicker. "Come here," he said quietly. "I need to speak with you." Lyra took a small step, then another, her heart pounding like a drum. She stopped within arm's reach of him, the closest she had ever been to someone of such power. He lowered his voice, meant only for her, though the entire courtyard strained to hear. "The pup will live. Because of you." Lyra blinked, startled. "I just found him. Anyone would have helped." "No," Aldric said, and his tone carried an edge of truth that made her chest tighten. "Not anyone." Before she could respond, Raven shoved forward, her voice shrill and desperate. "Your Majesty, she is lying. She probably lured that creature out of the woods to gain attention. She always tries to get sympathy. She is worthless, Your Majesty. She is nothing." Aldric turned. Slowly. When his eyes settled on Raven, the temperature of the courtyard seemed to drop. "Careful," he said softly. The word was worse than a roar. It was a warning wrapped in steel. Raven paled. "I did not mean, you meant exactly what you said." Aldric stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. "You mocked someone under my protection." A ripple of shock tore through the watching crowd. Under his protection. Lyra felt her knees weaken. Raven stammered. She is just an Omega." Aldric's eyes flashed silver. A deep, instinctive response rolled off him, ancient and territorial. "Say that again." Raven's mouth snapped shut. No one made a sound. Aldric turned back to Lyra, his expression changing, softening only for her. "You will walk with me," he said. It was not a question. It was a command spoken gently, but holding the full weight of a king. Lyra swallowed, her voice barely a breath. "Why?" Aldric looked at her as if the answer were obvious, as if it had already been written long before tonight. "Because something important happened in those woods," he said, "and I intend to understand it." Her heart raced. She realized the moment she placed her hand near his, the entire pack would watch, judge, whisper, fear. And still, with her pulse trembling like a trapped bird, she took a small step forward. The moment she moved, Aldrich shifted slightly closer, as if pulled by something he could not resist. The courtyard watched in stunned silence as the Alpha King guided the forgotten Omega away from the crowd, their steps falling in sync beneath the rising moon. Destiny pressing closer with every breath they took. Lyra followed Aldric along the torchlit corridor bordering the courtyard, her pulse a frantic rhythm she could not calm, the weight of 100 confused stares still pressing against her back. She kept her hands clasped tightly in front of her, afraid that if she let them fall to her sides they would tremble too visibly. Aldric did not touch her, but his presence beside her felt like standing near a controlled fire, steady and powerful, radiating a heat that curled around her ribs and made every breath feel too deep. When they reached the quieter walkway shaded by stone arches, Aldric slowed his pace and glanced toward her, silver eyes studying her, as if he were trying to understand something she herself did not know. "You did not tell anyone where you were going," he said, his tone even but edged with something heavier. Lyra swallowed. "No one notices when I am gone, Your Majesty." He stopped walking. For a heartbeat, she thought she had said something wrong, but the look on his face was not anger. It was disbelief, almost offense. "They notice," he said. "They simply choose not to care." She looked away quickly, unsure how to respond, unsure why his words sank into her so deeply. Aldric motioned toward a stone bench near the outer wall. "Sit," he said, but his voice was gentler this time. She obeyed, sitting at the very edge, her spine straight, her hands clenched together. Aldric remained standing for a moment, as if trying to decide how close he should be, then finally sat beside her, leaving enough space that she did not feel trapped, but not enough that she could pretend he was far away. He rested the injured pup on his lap, checking its breathing with surprising tenderness. For a man known to command armies, the sight was almost strange. "He is calming," Aldric murmured. "He responded to you more strongly than to any healer." Lyra shifted uneasily. "I did not do anything special, Your Majesty. I just held him." "And yet you soothed him," Aldric said. "Do you always have this effect on wounded creatures?" She blinked at him. I do not know. Animals trust me sometimes, but I never thought it meant anything." Aldric's gaze lingered on her profile for a long moment. "It means more than you realize." Before she could gather the courage to ask what he meant, hurried footsteps echoed down the walkway. A breathless guard bowed deeply before Aldric. "Your Majesty, Elder Rowan requests your presence in the main hall. They await your judgment for the incident that occurred earlier." Lyra stiffened. Raven. The humiliation. The laughter. Aldric's expression hardened instantly, the warmth near his eyes replaced by a cold authority that sent a faint shiver through her. "I will attend shortly," he said. The guard bowed again and rushed off. Lyra rose automatically, intending to excuse herself, but Aldric lifted his hand slightly. "Stay where you are." She froze, unsure. "Your Majesty? I am not finished speaking with you," he said. "And I will not have you wandering back into that courtyard alone." His voice dropped just enough for her to feel it. "They will not mock you again." Her breath tangled. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to understand why he cared at all. Aldric stood and turned fully toward her. "Walk with me to the hall. You will stand beside me while I address what happened." Lyra's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, they will think I am trying to seek favor, or that I am overstepping." Aldric stepped closer, his shadow falling over her as the torchlight shifted. "Let them think whatever they wish," he said. "I know the truth. That is enough." Her heartbeat stuttered. She felt something she had never felt in her life. The faint sense of being shielded, the sense that someone far stronger than she had deliberately placed themselves between her and the world. Aldric extended his hand, palm up, not touching her, but waiting. "Come, Lyra." The warmth in his tone made her breath catch. Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her hand near his. Not quite touching, close enough that their fingers almost brushed. Aldric exhaled, barely audible, as if that tiny motion confirmed something he already suspected. He moved forward, guiding her toward the hall, their steps matching again under the rising moon. And though Lyra tried to calm her pulse, she could not shake the sensation that something immense had begun shifting around her, something she was no longer able to outrun. The walk to the main hall felt unreal to Lyra, her footsteps quiet against the stone while Aldric moved beside her with a calm, unshakable certainty that made her chest tighten with every breath she took. She kept her eyes low, not out of shame this time, but because the weight of his presence made her feel unsteady, as if one glance too long might reveal more emotion than she could control. The torches along the corridor cast shifting light across his features, carving his expression into something impossibly composed. Yet every so often his gaze flicked toward her, checking that she was still at his side, still close enough that no one could reach her without passing through him first. When they reached the tall doors of the main hall, the sound of raised voices leaked through the cracks. Lyra recognized Elder Rowan's firm tone, Beta Raven's frantic protests, and the low murmurs of pack members who had gathered to witness the king's judgment. Aldric paused before entering, turning slightly toward her, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of command beneath the softness. "Stay close to me, Lyra. Whatever they say inside, You will remain where I can see you." She nodded, unable to form words. He pushed the doors open. The room went silent instantly. All eyes turned toward them as they stepped inside. Aldric leading with an authority that seemed to ripple through the air, Lyra following with her heart pounding as if it wanted to escape her chest. Elder Rowan bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, thank you for coming. We have gathered to address the earlier incident involving." His eyes flicked to Lyra with surprise, clearly not expecting her to enter beside the king. Raven, standing near the center of the hall, went rigid, her face draining of color. "Why is she here?" she blurted before anyone could stop her. "She is manipulating this. She wants attention. She wants to make us look cruel." Aldric's voice cut through the room like a blade. "I brought her." Raven flinched. Several wolves stepped back. Aldric moved forward, placing himself between Raven and Lyra so decisively that a hush fell across the hall. "Lyra Snowveil is under my protection," Aldric said, each word slow and unmistakable. "I stand here because she was mocked, humiliated, and targeted without cause." Raven's mouth opened, then closed again. A bead of sweat slid down her temple. "Your Majesty," she stammered. "She is an Omega. She is used to doing things for attention. It is what they do." "It is not." Aldric stepped closer to her, his expression cold enough to freeze air. "Say that again," he said. Raven swallowed hard, unable to speak. The king turned his attention to the watching wolves. "Your ranks do not determine who you may torment," he said. "Your traditions do not grant you the right to cruelty." His gaze swept the room, sharp and merciless. "Strength means nothing if it is used to harm the powerless." The hall remained painfully silent. Even the torches seemed to dim. Then Aldric faced Elder Rowan. "State the accusations." Elder Rowan glanced at Raven with clear reluctance. Beta Raven is charged with public humiliation of an Omega during a sacred ceremony, intentional harm to morale within the pack, and disrupting an event under the presence of the crown. Raven burst out. It was a joke. Everyone knew it was harmless. Aldric's eyes flashed silver. It was not harmless to her. Lyra felt something twist inside her chest, something warm and unfamiliar, because no one had ever spoken for her like that. Aldric continued, his voice steady and unwavering. "Your actions were witnessed by dozens. You humiliated someone who posed no threat to you. That is not dominance. That is cowardice." Raven trembled, tears filling her eyes. She looked around desperately, but not a single wolf moved to defend her. Elder Rowan bowed. "Your Majesty, we await your ruling." Aldric stood tall, his presence filling the room. Beta Raven will perform a formal apology to Lyra Snowveil and will be removed from ceremonial duties for the next season. Any further transgression will be dealt with more severely. Raven's knees buckled, but Aldric turned away without another glance. He stepped back toward Lyra. "Come," he said, quieter now, but still carrying the weight of command. She followed him out of the hall, her heart trembling. The moment the doors closed behind them, the noise of the pack faded, replaced by a softer quiet. Aldric looked at her, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. "You did nothing to deserve what happened tonight, Lyra, and I will not allow it to happen again." She could only whisper, "Why are you doing this?" Aldric held her gaze, something deep and unspoken rising behind his silver eyes. "Because something about you does not let me look away, and I intend to find out why." Her breath caught, her pulse racing as the truth settled between them, undeniable and growing stronger with every moment they shared. Lyra stood frozen beneath the archway as Aldric's words settled over her, powerful enough to make her breath stumble, because no one in her life had ever spoken to her with such certainty or such quiet intensity before. She felt the weight of his gaze on her, steady and unwavering, as if he saw something in her she had never seen in herself. The hall behind them buzzed with nervous whispers, but Aldric ignored all of it and stepped closer, his voice low and warm in a way that curled through her chest and made her pulse shiver. "Walk with me," he said, not a demand this time, but something quieter that somehow carried even more authority. She nodded, unable to trust her own voice, and followed beside him as they moved down the long corridor, past the torches that flickered like watching eyes. The castle walls grew quieter as they walked, the noise of the gathering fading behind them until only the soft echo of their footsteps remained. Lyra kept her gaze forward, though her awareness reached for Aldric with every step, feeling the subtle shift of his energy, the way his presence seemed to fill the space between them without ever touching her. When they reached an alcove overlooking the moonlit training grounds, Aldric stopped and rested one hand on the stone railing. The pup, now calmer and wrapped securely in a royal cloak, slept quietly against his chest. Aldric looked down at it for a long, thoughtful moment before speaking. "This pup is not just any young wolf," he said. "He carries an ancient line, a rare one." Lyra hesitated, her voice soft. "Is he yours, Your Majesty?" Aldric's jaw tightened, and the moonlight caught the faintest hint of emotion flashing across his face. "Yes," he said quietly. "He is my son." Lyra's breath caught. The tiny wolf pup she had held against her heart, the trembling creature she had shielded with her own body, was a prince. Her knees felt suddenly unsteady. I did not know," she whispered. Aldric turned to face her fully, silver eyes meeting hers with a certainty that made her pulse jump. "You reacted with compassion, not calculation. Most wolves would have called for guards or tried to claim a reward. But you protected him. You risked yourself without question." She shook her head slightly. "I could not leave him there. He was in pain. Anyone would have done the same." Aldric studied her for a long moment, the corners of his eyes narrowing just slightly, as if he disagreed but chose not to say so. Instead, he asked, "What happened in the forest before I arrived? How did you find him?" Lyra told him everything. The cry she heard, the twisted leg, the way the pup had clung to her. Aldric listened with absolute focus, absorbing every word, his expression darkening as she described the boulder trap. "That trap was not set by accident," he murmured. "Someone meant to harm him." The implication struck her with a cold shiver. Someone had tried to kill the prince. Aldric exhaled slowly, steadying the storm gathering in his voice. "I owe you more than a simple thanks, Lyra. You did something even my elite trackers could not. You found him before it was too late." She lowered her gaze. "I was just in the right place." "No," Aldric said, his voice dipping into a tone that vibrated through her bones. "It was more than that." He stepped closer, close enough that the warmth of his body battled the night air around her. "And I felt something in the forest," he said, his voice quiet, cautious, almost reverent. "Something I have not felt in years." Lyra backed up a half step, her breath catching. "Your Majesty, I do not understand." Aldric watched her with a depth that made the night feel too small. "Your scent changed," he said. "Only for a second, but I felt it." She shook her head quickly, heat rising in her cheeks. "That is impossible. I barely have a scent at all. The pack mocks me for it." "The pack is blind," Aldric said firmly. "And they are wrong." Lyra's throat tightened. She did not know what frightened her more, the idea that her scent had changed or the possibility that the king himself had sensed it. Aldric stepped even closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a touch along her skin. "There is something between us, Lyra, something neither of us can ignore forever." She swallowed hard, her heart thundering. "Your Majesty, what are you saying?" Aldric held her gaze for a long, breathless moment. Then his voice softened in a way she had never heard before. "I am saying that the night is far from over, and the truth is only beginning to reveal itself." Their eyes locked in the quiet dark, the moon rising behind them as if holding its breath, and Lyra felt the undeniable pull of fate coil tighter around them both. Lyra felt the world tilt beneath her as Aldric's words echoed through the chamber, sinking into her skin with the force of a truth she had never imagined could belong to her. Her breath faltered, her fingers curling against her palms as she struggled to steady herself, because nothing in her life had prepared her for the possibility that the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the realm, would ever speak such words to her. She shook her head slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Your Majesty, that cannot be right. You must be mistaken. I am an Omega. I barely register a scent at all." Aldric stepped toward her, the firelight casting shadows across his sharp features, and the air thickened again with that quiet pull, that strange energy that had wrapped around them since the forest. "Fate does not care about rank," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "And my wolf does not make mistakes." She backed up a step, her shoulder brushing the edge of the obsidian crib, the warmth from the fire fighting against the cold rising inside her. "But I am not extraordinary," she said, her voice trembling. "There is nothing special about me." The pack barely notices when I walk by. They mock me. They reject me. They always have. Aldric's expression darkened, not with anger toward her, but with something protective, fierce, older than any vow. They do not see you clearly, he said. I do. She swallowed hard, unable to look away from him even as fear tangled with disbelief inside her chest. What did you feel? She whispered. In the forest. Aldric's silver eyes softened, losing some of their sharpness, gaining something almost vulnerable. The moment you held my son, he said, I felt a shift in the air. A pull, as if something long dormant woke up. Lyra's heart pounded. But I did not do anything. You existed, Aldric said simply. And that was enough. The pup stirred in the crib, letting out a small sigh, and the gentle sound seemed to anchor them both. Aldric stepped closer again, stopping only when he was close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him. Close enough that the scent of pine and winter frost that belonged uniquely to him slipped into her senses. He lowered his voice. You felt it too, Lyra. The moment our hands touched. She closed her eyes briefly, remembering the spark that had leapt through her in the forest, the same spark that had flared again in the hall, the one she had tried so desperately to rationalize away. But she could not lie. Not now. I felt something, she admitted, her voice small. Aldric's breath deepened, relief and certainty blending in his expression. That was the bond, he said, or the beginning of it. Tears gathered behind Lyra's eyes, not from sadness, but from the terrifying unfamiliarity of hope. Why me? She whispered. Aldric looked at her with a softness she had never seen from him, not even with his son. Because fate chose you, he said, and because my wolf has accepted that choice. She shook her head again, fear creeping in. Your Majesty, if what you are saying is true, then I am in danger. If someone wants to harm your son, what will they do if they learn I am connected to him? Connected to you? Aldric's jaw tightened, and his energy shifted into something sharper, something unmistakably lethal. They will not touch you, he said. Not while I stand. Lyra stared at him, feeling her heart lift and tremble all at once. You cannot guarantee that. I can, Aldric said, stepping closer until the heat of him pressed against every breath she took. Because if fate has chosen you for me, then you are under the full protection of the crown. Lyra felt the air leave her lungs. I do not know how to be a mate, she whispered shakily. I do not know how to stand beside a king. I do not even know how to stand up for myself. Aldric reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and then brushed his fingers along hers with a touch so gentle it made her knees weaken. You do not need to know, he said softly. You only need to stay alive. I will handle the rest. She inhaled sharply, the warmth of his touch sinking into her like a promise. Aldric's voice dropped to a quiet murmur, one that carried the weight of destiny. Lyra Snowveil, whether you accept it now or not, you are the one fate wrote beside my name. The sparks between them pulsed again, stronger this time, as if the universe itself exhaled around them, and Lyra felt the terrifying truth settle deep into her bones. She was no longer invisible, no longer forgotten, no longer nothing. She was chosen. Lyra stood trembling beneath the weight of Aldric's words, the truth hanging between them like a suspended breath, fragile and immense, as though the entire world had narrowed to the space of firelit air that separated their hearts. She felt the pull of something ancient curling through her chest, something she had never believed could belong to her, yet now it wrapped itself around her ribs with undeniable certainty. Aldric did not move at first, watching her with a stillness that felt like the quiet center of a storm, silver eyes reflecting both the strength of a king and the aching vulnerability of a man who had waited too long for something he never expected to find. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady, stripped of every mask he wore before the world. Lyra, whatever you think you are lacking, whatever lies they forced you to believe, none of it changes what my wolf knows. A soft tremor ran through her. And what is that? His breath deepened, his gaze never leaving hers. You are mine, he said, whether the realm is ready to accept it or not. Lyra's heart twisted, a blend of fear and wonder surging inside her, because part of her wanted to step back into the shadow where she had always lived, but another part, small, trembling, but alive, wanted to take one step forward into the light he held out to her. She opened her mouth, unsure if any sound would come out. when a sudden knock echoed through the chamber door. Aldric's posture shifted instantly, power rolling beneath his skin like thunder. "Enter," he commanded. A guard stepped inside and bowed. "Your Majesty, the council requests an immediate update on the prince's condition. They are waiting in the throne room." Lyra tensed, instinctively stepping back, but Aldric's hand lifted slightly, stopping her retreat even without touching her. "Tell them the prince is safe," Aldric said, his tone sharp but composed. The guard hesitated. "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but they will want to know who found him." The tension in Lyra's chest tightened until it almost hurt. She did not want her name spread across the realm, did not want enemies marking her in silence. But Aldric did not even pause. "I will inform them myself," he said. Dismissed. The guard bowed and left. Silence returned to the chamber, thick and heavy. Lyra pressed her hands together, unsure of how to breathe. "Your Majesty, when the council hears what happened, they will question why I was anywhere near the prince. They will question you for protecting me." Aldric stepped closer, his presence wrapping around her like a shield. "Let them question," he said. "Their doubt changes nothing." She shook her head softly. "I am afraid." His expression gentled, and for one quiet moment, Aldric looked at her not as a king, but as the man fate had tethered to her. "You are allowed to be afraid," he murmured. "But do not mistake fear for weakness. You faced danger tonight with more courage than half my warriors." The words hit her harder than any insult ever had, because they were the truth she had never been allowed to believe. Slowly, almost unconsciously, she lifted her eyes to meet his. Aldric exhaled, as if that small action undid something inside him. "I must go to the council," he said reluctantly. "But you will not return to the servants' quarters." Lyra blinked. "Then where?" Aldric motioned toward the adjoining chamber, his voice steady. "You will stay in the royal wing under my protection until the threat is eliminated. No one will touch you. No one will mock you again." Her breath caught. "You would do that for me?" Aldric's answer was immediate and absolute. "I would move kingdoms for you." Her knees weakened at the quiet conviction in his tone. Aldric stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper that brushed like heat across her skin. "Rest tonight, Lyra Snowveil. You will need your strength." "For what?" she breathed. Aldric held her gaze with the softest, most dangerous promise she had ever seen. "For the moment the realm learns that the Omega they mocked, rejected, and cast aside is the mate fate chose for their king." Then he reached past her, pulling the curtains of the chamber gently closed, sealing her in warmth and safety as he stepped away, his silhouette framed in silver moonlight. Lyra pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat thunder with something wild and new. As the truth settled fully into her soul, she was no longer invisible, no longer forgotten, no longer nothing. She was chosen, and destiny was only just beginning.